بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Before we look at this week's lesson, just a quick recap for a reminder of what we discussed in our last lesson of Mukhtasar al-Quduuri. In our last lesson, we were looking at some miscellaneous rulings with regards to janaza, with regards to death and burial, with regards to the shrouding and the bathing of the deceased. And we were looking at the ruling with regards to visiting the graveyard. We also looked at the ruling with regards to whether it is permissible for women and females to visit graveyards. We also looked at rulings with regards to post-mortem, and we also looked at rulings with regards to stillborn child, or if a child was born and passed away straight away, then what is the ruling in such a situation? Now we still got some sections of the bathing and the janaza left, and the sections which we are going to look at is got to do more, or the rulings which I'm going to explain to you is now mainly derived from the hadith rather than the books of fiqh. There are certain topics or sections which can be found in the books of hadith, but they are not covered, or they are not covered properly, shall I say, in the books of fiqh. So what I'm going to do for the first part of the lesson is that just to look at some topics linked with the janaza, linked with the bathing, but wasn't covered in detail in the books of fiqh. Now the first section which we're going to look at, in front of me I have Sunan al-Tirmidhi. The first section which we're going to look at is a chapter entitled in Arabic as Babu Ma Ja'a fi Taqbil al-Mayyit, which means the chapter regarding kissing the deceased. Now the hadith narrated by Sayyidah Aisha anha, she narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam qabbala Uthman bin Maz'un wa huwa mayyitun. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissed the companion, the Sahaba, whose name was Sayyiduna Uthman bin Maz'un radhiyallahu anhu, wa huwa mayyitun, when he passed away. And she goes on to say, وَهُوَ يَبْكِي, and that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was crying, that tears were being shed from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's eyes on Sayyiduna Uthman bin Maz'un radhiyallahu anhu when he passed away. Now from this particular hadith, we can derive two rulings. The first ruling which we can derive is that it is permissible to cry when a loved one or when someone passes away. To shed a tear, to cry, then that is not considered to be against sabr. That is not considered to be against patience. We touched on this topic a few weeks ago, that many people think that a loved one passed away, a father passed away, a mother passed away, so sabr is that you don't cry. No, that is totally incorrect. Sabr is that you don't lose your control. You don't start crying or start wailing as was the practice in the days of ignorance. But what you do is that if a person, say for example, out of true hurt and out of this kind of sadness at somebody leaving this world, one or two tears, if it was shed, then that is not against sabr, that is not against patience. The first thing we can derive from this hadith is, number one, is that it is permissible to cry over the deceased. The second thing which we can derive from this hadith is the permissibility of kissing the deceased. Somebody passes away, then to kiss that person, say on his forehead. Again, this is out of love again, out of like sadness that somebody has passed away, then you're just like in a way saying goodbye to him and kiss him on his forehead. Then this is something which is permissible, and this is something which is allowed, and this is the practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as quite clearly mentioned in the hadith, that he kissed Sayyiduna Uthman bin Maz'un radhiyallahu anhu. Which takes me on to another point which we can derive from this hadith, is that why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kiss Sayyiduna Uthman bin Maz'un radhiyallahu anhu? During Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, many companions passed away, many companions were martyred. Take an example of Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu anhu, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and as I explained last week as well, also at the same time a foster brother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Hamza radiallahu anhu, they were breastfed by Sayyida Halima Sa'diyya radiallahu anha. But when he was martyred, there's no mention in a hadith where he said Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissing Sayyiduna Hamza radiallahu anhu. Similarly, during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, even though he died as a non-believer, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's uncle Abu Talib, when he passed away, again there's no mention of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissing his forehead. What I'm trying to say is that many companions passed away who were martyred in various battles, like the Battle of Badr, like the Battle of Uhud, but there's no mention of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissing them. But here in this hadith it tells us that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissed Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radiallahu anhu, which then leads to a question, why did he kiss him? Other Sahabas, you could say to a certain extent, had more virtue. But why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kiss Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radiallahu anhu? Now there's a few reasons which I'm going to mention. Number one opinion goes on to say that Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radiallahu anhu was also another foster brother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is possible to have many foster brothers. As I explained before as well, that in Arabia in those days what would happen is that there will be one wet nurse. So if you were to take the example of Halima Sa'diyya, and she would have many children who would come to her, she would breastfeed them. So Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radiallahu anhu, one opinion goes on to say that he was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's foster brother. Hence again this like sadness of him passing away, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissed him. Another reason goes on to say that Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radiallahu anhu was one of the first people to accept Islam. We call them people the Sabiqun al-Awwalun. The very first people, the very first batch to accept Islam, Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radiallahu anhu was from amongst them. Because, as I can probably explain before as well, that initially for 3 years, when the first revelation came, in the cave era, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam coming and telling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to read Iqra, for 3 years thereafter, there was no open da'wah. There was no open preaching, no clear preaching of Islam. But in fact, within the 3 years, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told by Allah just to concentrate on your family, concentrate on your close friends, and when you build them up, when the bases are firm, then you could go for da'wah, then you could go for your preaching, then you could go for the tabligh. So exactly as well, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't told that, oh, okay, you just become a Muslim, your wife, Sayyidah Khadija anha, had just converted, okay, now you two go out and start preaching about Islam. It's going to be really suicidal in that situation, because there's only two of them. How are they going to go and start preaching about Islam where you've got basically hundreds and thousands of years of idol worshipping going on in that particular area, i.e. the city of Makkah? So what happened was that for the first 3 years, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told, you try to convince your close family members. So they were Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's wife Khadija, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's cousin brother Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's close friend and ally Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So when they became Muslims and they were like proper strong, like hard when it came to stones, you could say, in their belief and in their iman, when the basis was done, when the foundation was raised, thereafterwards the order came from Allah, وَأَنْزِلْ أَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, which means go out and now start preaching to your qabila, now start preaching to your tribe, now start preaching to the Quraysh. So what we can gather here is that first and foremost, you need to build yourself up first before you could give the da'wah. Okay? Because again, I explained this before as well, when you yourself is strong and firm in your iman, in your belief, then what happens is that when the words then come out in terms of preaching, it comes out from your heart. If you're not strong, just say for example, you're just like relaxing, you're doing drugs, you're like listening to music, you go to someone and say, oh, brother, don't do drugs, don't do music. They're not going to take you because because there's first and foremost, there's a bit of hypocrisy there. There's not going to be that kind of effect in the words you are saying. Similarly, for a person, to say for example, an alim or an imam, it's very important for him that he builds himself up. He kind of like reaches a certain level or degree of piety and taqwa, because when he reaches that particular level in terms of piety and righteousness, so whatever words he then says, he then has an effect on his audience, or he has an effect on the listeners. So this is what we can gather from the second point, is that he was the very first people to become Muslim. So therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went and kissed his forehead. Some other reasons is mentioned, such as he was one of those companions who migrated to two places. He firstly migrated to Abyssinia, and thereafterwards he migrated to Medina Munawwara. Other reasons such as he was those companions who participated, or he was one of the companions who participated in the Battle of Badr, and he was also the first companion to pass away from the Muhajirin. From those who migrated from Makkah to Medina, he was the first one to pass away. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissed him. It's also mentioned that he was the very first person to be buried in Jannatul Baqi. And it's also mentioned another kind of virtue of Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radhiyallahu anhu. Before a clear order came of alcohol in terms of its impermissibility and its unlawfulness, Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radhiyallahu anhu made alcohol haram upon himself. There was no legal ruling. It was still technically permissible to drink alcohol, but he knew the disadvantages, he knew the evil effects of alcohol and intoxication. So what he did, he made alcohol unlawful and haram. And this is again another beauty of Islam and the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's nizam or his world works, is that those people who have been chosen by Allah, either to be a prophet, either to be someone close like a companion to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, either to be a great imam or a great scholar, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does is from a young age, He keeps them away from bad things. You look at the biographies of our great shuyukh, you see their young age, like when they were 5, 6, 10, your early age, you never see anything, any of them, or they were like messing around, they were doctors, they were like relaxing on the street and so on, and then they became great shuyukh. What happens is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He chooses people for da'wah, when He chooses imams or great shuyukh, from a young early age, He keeps them safe from the bad things of society. Take a look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even though he wasn't a prophet, it's mentioned in the various seerah books, that even though Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was growing up, even though he wasn't a prophet, so there wasn't a legal requirement, but even then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam inherently knew the idol worshipping is something wrong. He knew alcohol is something unlawful and haram. He made alcohol haram and unlawful upon himself. He knew gambling is something unlawful and haram. He made it haram upon himself. Even if you look back in history to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandfather Abdul Muttalib, so again it's mentioned in the books of Seerah that he was a very, very pious person. And he also made alcohol and gambling and these kind of things haram upon himself. So what I'm trying to say is that pious people, pious shuyukh, what happens is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from a young age, He keeps them away from the ills of society. You never see a story of a great sheikh who, when he was a child or when he was growing up in his 13s, in his 14s, in his early teens, that he was a drug dealer, he was doing this, he was doing that, and then afterwards, he became a great chef. Generally speaking, it doesn't happen. It could be, there's always, exception to the rules, because that's all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, but what I'm trying to say, from a young age, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps these pious people away from bad things. So exactly as well, what we can derive from this particular paragraph, what I've just narrated to you, is the virtue of Sayyidina Uthman bin Maz'un radhiyallahu anhu. Now the next topic which we're going to look at, again in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, it's entitled as Babu ma ja'a fi at-ta'am yusna'u li ahli al-mayyit, which means making food for the family of the deceased. Now again, it's mentioned in the hadith that when the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ja'far, when he passed away, so it mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to the companions or said to the people that make food for the family of Ja'far, فَإِنَّهُ قَدْ جَاءَ, indeed something has come to them which has made them engage, which has made them busy, i.e. they are now occupied in something and they don't have the opportunity, or they won't have the opportunity to make some food or to cook for themselves. Now what we can gather from this particular hadith, and this is like the practice of the sunnah, is that if somebody passes away, just say for example a father or a brother or someone has passed away, now that family, they now in total like disarray in terms of they mourning over the death. So just say for example the wife, she may have young kids, but because her husband has passed away, she's more worried, she's more sad regarding that, and she won't have the opportunity, she may not have the courage, she may not have the time to cook anything for her young children. So therefore what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised the companions to do is that in that situation, the family of the deceased, in terms of other external family, uncles, aunties, or even like for example next door neighbors, they should take the responsibility in preparing or cooking food for the family of the deceased. And this again is, even if you want to put the sunnah to one side, I know we do it because it's a sunnah, but if you want to put the sunnah to one side, even then it's still good manners. You know, if you were to forget, obviously we're doing it because of sunnah, but even if you were to put the sunnah to a side, even cooking food for someone in that situation is considered to be good adab, good etiquette, and if it happens to be your neighbor, then it's one of the rights that neighbor has over you. Because obviously look, there's just somebody has passed away, you know, they're rushing from the hospital and then home, and then all of a sudden they get the news that the father has passed away, the wife, say for example, in total grief, total mourning, so she's not thinking about food, you know, that's the last thing on her mind. That's why when there's like a bereavement in the family, you don't really think about food, you don't think about like sleeping and so on, you're just like sad, you're overcome with grief. You've got other things more important to think about in terms of the burial, in terms of the shrouding and so on and so forth. So therefore what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised you, okay, at least take one burden of themselves. Obviously you can't compensate the grief they're going through, like somebody has passed away, so you can't compensate that. But what you can, the least you can do is prepare some food, prepare a curry, prepare a salad, and then give it to them, and obviously you'll get the reward of acting upon the sunnah, but also if they happen to be your neighbors, then you're acting upon another reward in terms of fulfilling the rights and the haqq of a neighbor, and it's also considered to be good manners and good etiquette as well. Which then takes me on to another issue here, which is quite common in our Bengali culture, with a word which is called shinni. And what does shinni mean, and what's the basis of that, whether it's lawful or whether it's permissible or not. Now what normally happens in the Bengali culture is that when that person, obviously when he's passed away and the day is janaza, so just for example, his janaza is on a Friday after Jummah, then what they normally tend to do is that they tend to buy boxes of apples, boxes of bananas, boxes of oranges, and they put it outside the masjid. So people, what will happen is after they pray the janazah, then when they're leaving the masjid, they'll take a few apples or a few bananas and so on home. So this is obviously this is how shinni works. Okay. Now obviously, why are they doing this? Now obviously, when you speak to them, they say that we're doing it with the intention of something called Isal al-Sawab. What is Isal? Again, we looked at this concept, Isal al-Sawab, a couple of weeks ago. Isal al-Sawab basically means that you do an act of a good deed, and then the reward or the sawab is then passed on to the deceased. Okay, so like example, you may go for say Hajj, and just say you do a nafal tawaf, and then you say, okay, this reward or sawab is for my father who passed away, or it's for my mother who passed away, for my brother who passed away. That is called Isal al-Sawab. So what they do is that they're feeding people apples and bananas and so on, and the intention is of Isa al-Sawab. That's what they say, Isa al-Sawab, that the people who's going to eat this, they're going to get, obviously, you just fed someone, so therefore the reward is going to pass to the deceased. Now, feeding someone is actually a good action, it's actually a good deed. But if we want to get the full reward and the full sawab, you should feed poor people. Okay, you should actually send the apples or not send it, but basically, either with the money, buy the apples or the bananas, say in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, send it there, so that the poor people could eat it, and there afterwards the reward can be conveyed to the deceased who's passed away. Now obviously this doesn't really happen, but what normally happens is just like leave it outside, and obviously you get like rich people, i.e. like, what I mean rich, not rich in that word, but rich in terms of we're not poor, we have sufficient money enough to give zakat, because obviously in Islam someone who's got enough money to give zakat is considered to be ghani, is considered to be rich. So when that person now eats the fruits and so on, he's not going to get any reward or sawab for that. What's happened is that it's just like you just fed a rich person. Just say you invited someone to your house and you just like fed that person. So you're not going to get the reward or the sawab of Isa al-Sawab here. So there'll be no conveying of the reward or the sawab to the deceased in that situation. So what basically happened is that you just like use the money, you just bought some apples and bananas, and you just like basically fed the rich people, and there's actually no sawab and no reward which is going to be transferred to the deceased. So that's one thing. Now remember, this can only be permissible, what I just explained, is if the money is being used from the inheritors or from the heir side, not from the deceased wealth. So that's like another problem here. What happens is that those who do the shinni, those who do this, they use the wealth from the deceased. They use his money. Like for example, what normally happens is that when he passes away, the Islamic ruling is that first and foremost he should use whatever is left over, say in his bank or at home, for his burial, for his, buying the coffin, for buying the coffin, buying, say for example, the plot of land. So you should use the money first for his burial, for his bathing and deceased. Thereafter, whatever money is left over will either then be given for his outstanding debt, and thereafterwards whatever is left over will now be used for the inheritors, for the heirs, i.e. for his son, for his daughters, for his wife, and so on and so forth. You're not allowed to use the deceased money for these kind of shinnis, for these kind of acts of reward and so on. In that situation, the only way to make it permissible is that you use the money from the heirs out of their own will give the money from their own pocket, and also they try to send it to poor places like Pakistan, Bangladesh, where there are a lot of destitute and poor people there. Feed them there, do the shinni there, do that particular act there, so that the reward and the sawab can be conveyed to the deceased. If you're just going to do it here, just feeding the rich people, that reward is not going to be transferred to the deceased. And also, if you are using the deceased wealth, that will also be considered impermissible as well. Just keep these two things in mind. And just one final issue here before we conclude this section is with regard to the period of mourning. Now, the ruling is that when a husband in particular passes away, and if the wife, if she is pregnant, so the ruling is that her iddah or her waiting period is all the way up to until she gives birth. So all the way until she gives birth, that is her waiting period. So just say for example, if her husband passed away and just say the wife was 2 months pregnant, so she will now have to wait 7 months before she finishes her iddah and her waiting period. And that is basically her period of mourning. And I'll explain that how to do the period of mourning in a second. However, if a husband passed away, and if a woman is not pregnant, then the Quranic order is very clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that such a woman will have to observe a waiting period, a iddah of arba'ata ashuri wa ashra, i.e. 4 months and 10 days. So remember, if a woman when her husband passes away, if she is pregnant, then her iddah, her period of mourning, is until she gives birth to the child. And if she is not pregnant, then her period of mourning is 4 months and 10 days. Now, during the period of mourning, what should the woman do? Now, it's mentioned that the woman, she should stay at home. And during that period of 4 months and 10 days, she should abstain from wearing any fancy clothing. She should abstain from wearing any kind of makeup and lipstick, these kind of things, flashy clothing and so on. She should abstain from doing that. Even she should abstain from going out of the house. She should stay at home and obviously pray her salah as she normally will do, pray for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do dua for her ex-husband who has passed away, these kind of things. So this is what she should do for 4 months and 10 days. Now, a question rises is that, just say for example, if a woman, she's working, her husband has passed away, then can she continue to work during the period of mourning? Now, the ruling is that it's best that she doesn't, in terms of if she can get like a holiday for 4 months, it's going to be a bit far-fetched, but just say if she can, then she should do it. However, if that is not possible, then it is permissible for her to work. And the reason why it's permissible for her to work, and we look at this inshallah when we look at the section of divorce later, there are 2 types of women who may be in their period, in the waiting period. The first type of woman is that woman who has been divorced by her husband, who has been given a talaq, like 1, 2, 3, or even 3, doesn't matter. So the ruling is that that woman has to now observe a waiting period, and if she's menstruating, then it's 3 menstruation cycles. If she's not menstruating, then it's 3 months. Now, during those 3 months or 3 menstruation cycles, it's the obligation of her husband, her ex-husband now, to financially support her, maintain her, give her accommodation, so on and so forth, during the 3 months, during the 3 menstruation cycles. And if the husband doesn't, then obviously he will be considered very, very simple. But what I'm trying to say is that by law, strictly speaking, by the Sharia law, during those 3 months, it's the responsibility of the husband to financially maintain his ex-wife, all the way until the iddah and the waiting period finishes. Thereafterwards, then all the financial requirements are stopped. But for a woman, the second type of woman is a woman whose husband has passed away and now she's observing the iddah. Now you've got a situation here is that, just say for example, the husband passed away and he's left nothing for the wife. Just say he's passed away but he's actually bankrupt, so all the money which he did have, any kind of savings, it's all gone to pay off his debt. So now you have a scenario here where no one's going to look after the wife anymore, because obviously her husband has passed away. And sometimes we do say, oh well, her family could look after her, or sometimes the husband's family can look after her. Fair enough, they do, but then you have to realize 4 months and 10 days, it's not like a couple of weeks looking after. It's a quite large, long period, 4 months and 10 days. And sometimes people, they do promise and say, oh, you know what, I'll look after you, don't worry, I'll give you some money. They probably do it for first 2-3 weeks until the mourning kind of slowly dies away. Then afterwards, they forget about that particular widow. So therefore, in that situation, the scholars have said that because she has to now look after herself financially, if she does have a job or if she needs to work, then she can work, say, during the day, but at night time she will have to return home. And obviously when she does go out to work during the day, then obviously she should abstain from wearing any kind of flashy clothing, abstain from wearing makeup and so on, and to show the period of mourning for 4 months and 10 days. Now remember, the period of mourning, this 4 months and 10 days, only applies to the wife of the deceased, i.e. the wife of the husband who passed away. For anybody else, for the deceased brother, for the deceased sister, for the deceased son or daughter, those kind of things, the period of mourning lasts for 3 days. That's it. After 3 days, that's it, it's gone. You have to now move on with your life. Obviously, you're still going to remember everything and so on. You're afraid of, but obviously you can't now be stuck in terms of you totally abstain from speaking to anyone, you show that kind of sad face all the time, you abstain from wearing any nice clothing. After 3 days, then that would be considered wrong for someone besides the wife. So So for the brothers, say, of the deceased, for the sister of the deceased, for the sons or daughters of the deceased, their period of mourning is only for 3 days, and after the 3 days, they have to now move on with their life. And another kind of practice which I just mentioned here as well is that it's not quite common, especially in some Muslim families, is that whenever somebody passes away, they start wearing black clothing. So the janaza, they'll go with their black jubbas or their black, qameez and so on. And remember, that is not a sunnah to wear black clothing when somebody passes away. It's actually a practice of, other religions besides Islam, but it's not the practice of Islam to wear black clothing and so on. So therefore, this again should be something refrain from. A lot of people see that when somebody passes away, they start wearing black jubbas, black clothing, everything, and they think that we're doing a period of mourning here. The period of mourning is in terms of abstaining from wearing, flashy clothing, abstaining from wearing makeup and these kind of things. The period of mourning during that period is that you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you should, pray for the deceased and so on. And this period of mourning should not be demonstrated or should not be shown by wearing black clothing. That's not the period of mourning. Islam doesn't say that. Islam says that the death in a family should be actually a wake-up call for you to start now mending your ways. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago that sometimes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can test you in various different ways. And this is one of the ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may test you. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He can test you. How does He test you? Sometimes He can test you through hunger. Sometimes He can test you through hope, through fear. And sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can test you وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ, i.e. less wealth. I.e. like, for example, you lost a job, so now there's like an automatic kind of stop of income. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will want to see you, how do you react in such a situation, and also wal anfus. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can test you by taking the life of a loved one away. Allah wants to see you how you react. Remember, this dunya or this world which we are living in, every single aspect, every single movement in this dunya which we do is always a test from Allah. Any kind of situation, any predicament, any scenarios, these are all tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even that's why was one of the questions the companions, they asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when they were defeated in the battle of Uhud. They thought that, we are Muslims, we are the followers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are the pagans of Makkah, they are on batil, they are on fault. How was it that we, the Muslims, were defeated in that particular battle? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا, which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave defeat to the Muslims so that He can derive who are the true believers, وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا, and who are the munafiqs and who are the hypocrites. So certain things will happen when you think that everything is going against you, when you think that Muslims are being persecuted, when you see that these bad things are happening to Muslims, these bad things are happening to your family, like you see all of a sudden like a loved one pass away, then you see another loved one pass away, then you see that you lose your job, then you see that you lose your home. Remember, all these things are tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests you so that He can derive how firm your iman, how firm your belief is. So that concludes or wraps the section with regards to the janaza and the bathing and the ghusl. Now, before we conclude, inshallah, just want to make a start on the next section, just very briefly, just a few things, and then inshallah we'll finish. The next section which we are going to start is with regards to zakat, kitabul zakat. And I'm just not going to go into too detail this week, probably that will be left for next week, but just want to mention a few things with regards to zakat, you could say a kind of introduction to zakat, and then we'll leave it for this particular week. Now, the first point with regards to zakat is, when did zakat become obligatory? Now, there are various opinions regarding what year did zakat become obligatory. Some scholars have the view that zakat became obligatory in the second year of Hijri. However, the most correct opinion, and this is the opinion of the majority of the scholars, is that the obligation of zakat became obligatory before migration towards Medina Munawwara, i.e. before Hijrah, that's when zakat became obligatory. And the reason why we say that is that there are many verses in the Holy Quran where salah, i.e. prayers, and zakat have been mentioned together. Like Allah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. And all the scholars unanimously agree that salah was something which became obligatory before migration, i.e. during the night journey towards Mi'raj and the obligation of salah. So therefore scholars have said that zakat also became obligatory before. However, it's what we call in Arabic nisab, like what's the legal threshold which you need to have before you give zakat. In which things do you give zakat? If you have animals, how much zakat do you have to give? If you have crops, how much zakat do you have to give? What we call the nisab and so on, the legal threshold, that became obligatory, or that became more clear, or that was kind of defined after migration and after Hijrah. But the actual giving of zakat, that became obligatory before, but in terms of how much you have to give, or in which items you have to give zakat, that was something which was then defined by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after migration and after Hijrah. So that is the first point. The second point which I want to mention here is that was zakat obligatory, or is zakat obligatory on prophets or on anbiyas, or is it just something obligatory on people, i.e. on the followers of a particular prophet or on the ummah of the particular prophet? Now again, there are two opinions. Some scholars of the view that zakat is something obligatory for the followers of a particular prophet and not obligatory on the prophet itself. Whereas another opinion goes on to say that zakat is something which is obligatory on both the people, the followers, and also on the prophets and the anbiya as well, similar to other kind of orders and commands of Allah, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command regarding salah. So salah isn't just obligatory on the people and the prophets, they don't have to pray salah, no. The prophets also have to pray salah, and also the people have to pray salah as well. Similarly, fasting is not like obligatory on the followers of the Prophet, on the companions and the prophets, they don't have to fast. No, they also have to fast as well. So similarly, the second opinion goes on to say that the same way people have to give zakat, i.e. the followers have to give zakat, similarly, the prophets and the anbiyas, they have to give zakat as well. And they derive this particular rule or this particular ruling from the words of Sayyiduna Isa alayhi salam when the people were, na'udhu billah, taunting Sayyida Maryam regarding where on earth did you get this particular child from. So she then gestured to the child, that this child will now talk. So then they got even more angry that how can this particular child talk. So at that time Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam then replied by saying, وَأَوْصَانِي بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ مَا كُنْتُ حَيًّا, which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered me to establish salah, was zakah, and to give zakat, ma dumtu hayya, as long as I live. So from there scholars have derived that the giving of zakat not only is obligatory on the people and the masses, but it was also obligatory on the anbiyas and the messengers as well. But as I said, the majority of the Hanafi fiqh, the Hanafi ulama, they're of the view that zakat is not obligatory on prophets and anbiyas. And the main reason they cite very quickly is because, as mentioned in the hadith of Sahih Muslim, the reason why we give zakat is because to purify our wealth. As mentioned in the hadith of Sahih Muslim, that the whole purpose to give zakat is that you know what we earn throughout the year. You know, there's always doubt on what we earn. Sometimes it could be from interest money. Wallah, we don't know, just like somebody just gets into our pocket. Sometimes that £10 which you're getting from someone, you know, you could have been, if you were to trace it all the way back, some gambling money, and it's come to you. It could have been some lottery money, and it's come to you. So the whole purpose we give zakat is that we kind of totally purify our wealth. But because the Anbiya alayhi salatu was salam, they were, but when whatever they earned, it was pure, it was tayyib from before. But for our wealth, it's not tayyib, it's not part and pure from before, so therefore we give zakat to purify that. Whereas the Prophets and the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, whatever they earn tayyib, they earn something pure and fast, so therefore there's no need for them to cleanse it and purify it further by giving zakat. So therefore the Hanafi scholars and the ulamas of the view that zakat is something which is not obligatory for Anbiya and for Prophets to give. Inshallah, we'll just leave it there for this week. May Allah give us all peace, and we said, wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.